Welcome back to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. Let me just remind you again, we are the UK's largest pro-marriage organisation, representing tens of thousands of supporters from all faiths and none who support this thing, one man, one woman marriage. And, you know, up until 5 minutes ago, that wasn't a controversial thing to say, but it seems to be nowhere more so than in our schools. And the education system seems to be awash with all sorts of different teaching. Anything but marriage seems to be taught in schools these days. Now, we spoke a year or so ago to Lizzie Harewood from the Association of Christian Teachers. And she's back with us again because she's been doing some very, very interesting work. Well, Lizzie Harewood, it's a privilege to talk to you again. We've spoken to you before a year or so ago about the excellent work of ACT. And before we get into it, let's just encourage anybody who's listening, who's a teacher, or anybody who knows a Christian teacher, to encourage them to get involved with the work you guys do. The Association of Christian Teachers. It's fantastic work. And we'll put your website up and just promote people to go across and have a look and get involved in what you're doing and to join the crowd and the supportive work that's going on there. Well done, and all power to you. Now, we're talking again because you've recently produced a very interesting and kind of shocking report. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your report, the background, and indeed what it says?
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Tony, for having me on to speak about this. So, as you mentioned, ACT, we work with Christians in education, mainly teachers, but any Christian that has a role, either a voluntary role or a employed role in education. And over the years, the contact I've had with Christian teachers has increasingly highlighted worrisome materials and indicated that the trajectory in relationships and sex education that's been picked up recently by MPs such as Miriam Cates is not sensationalized. So we had anecdotal stories of teachers being forced to deliver unscientific materials, a class trip of year 10 students to a pride march, drag queen story times for 4-year-olds being held against their teachers' wishes and indeed against without their knowledge on the day that they don't work. And I suppose we wanted to try and find out whether these were isolated incidents. Because they were getting more numerous, we decided to do a little bit of research of our own and ask whether Christian perspectives on issues such as marriage, sex, gender were truly allowed a genuine hearing alongside the other progressive interpretations. So we did a survey amongst Christian professionals, and we got about 120 responses. And although that's a reasonably small cohort, you've got to remember that would represent thousands. And we asked them questions about ideological materials or the materials that their schools were using. We asked about the nature of those materials. We asked about good practice. We asked about how the schools respond to moral objections when Christians raise concerns about the resources they are being asked to use, or about the third-party providers that come in and deliver the curriculum. And it was quite illuminating, really.
So give us a quick summary of the top-level findings then, Lizzie, before we go into the detail.
So I suppose we learned 3 things. The first is that there is evidence that the existence of the ideological bias in the curriculum actually disregards traditional Christian views. The second is that Christian teachers are becoming increasingly marginalised and are facing unnecessary dilemmas professionally. And the third, and potentially the most concerning, is that sometimes Christian teachers are removed from teaching relationships and sex education because of their faith. And that raises concerns that schools really could be breaking the law.
Not because of what they teach or what they say, but for the mere fact that they have faith.
That they have certain convictions about gender and sexuality that stem from a biblical worldview. And even if they present those in a balanced way, within a variety of perspectives, in a plural curriculum, sometimes because of the concerns they raise about the way other perspectives aren't presented in that way, they are then labelled and then asked not to teach that particular part of the curriculum.
Well, that's very interesting, because the Education Act, of course, just requires balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Which anybody of any personal persuasion should be able to bring balance to a discussion in a classroom.
So only 15.4% of those who responded reported that gender theory, which claims biological sex and gender identity are distinct factors, doesn't feature in the curriculum. And then on other issues such as abortion and feminism, only 20.8% said that the curriculum in their school offered a balance of opinions.
So essentially, if I flip those figures, 85% of teaching does include teaching around gender fluidity, and also 80% of teaching actually includes, feminism and all sorts of other things that you were just referring to.
Yes, I mean, I need to be careful because obviously we broke down some of these results. Some teachers said they weren't entirely sure. Some said it wasn't clear that that biological sex and gender identity were taught about in such kind of extreme terms. But quite a proportion said this is taught as fact, and quite a proportion said that there's no clarity on this. But only 15% said that it doesn't feature at all. So the other respondents would say it would feature in the curriculum and it's covered in a really inconsistent way or a really misleading way.
Because, of course, what we're looking at is balance, aren't we?
Yeah.
And that some people have these views, which is how it should be. And are we looking here at secondary schools, or are we looking at primary schools, or both?
So again, the report, in the findings, we broke down the data into stage of education. So it's quite an interesting read. There's about 24 pages of it. We broke down the data into the types of concerns, the type of school that our respondents were teaching in, and then the different kind of concerns about gender theory, political impartiality, over-sexualized resources, trans identities, etc.
And we can point to the report. I'm guessing it's on your website. We'll put a link up. And we'll put something in the description that points to the report. What about, can I ask, Lizzie, because when I've had the real privilege of going up and down the country and talking to thousands and thousands of our supporters, and really one thing that comes out is the fear factor, that actually parents and teachers are too scared to say anything. Did the report touch on that at all, and what were the findings?
Yes, absolutely. So we asked our respondents how they responded to leadership when they were asked to teach things or asked to observe the teaching of these things by outside providers. And we asked for examples of sympathy for religious beliefs or objections or examples of hostility. Some teachers would say that they try to avoid teaching material they completely disagree with, or they adapt it or tone it down or left out bits, probably without senior leadership knowledge. Some have said that their careers have suffered because they have sought to avoid this and now have been asked to be, or have requested to be removed from this, or have been told they need to be removed. One teacher said that they now teach just 3 days a week, and the decision was partly to avoid teaching RSHE.
Right.
There were quite a few examples, not just of the kind of, the inappropriate ideological material, but then when teachers were responding or making complaints, the then protocol seemed to be that teachers were often placed into a state of fear. So, for example, one teacher was asked to teach RSE avoiding heteronormative language, and in the respondents' words, to celebrate and affirm underage sex and encourage children to explore their sexuality. Now, this teacher made official complaint about this, and the school hired a barrister to investigate the teacher. The barrister reported that they would be unfit to teach relationships and sex education, would need further education and training themselves. And obviously we can't comment on legal cases.
Yeah.
But there was another case where one of the teachers was also a governor, was expected to approve a policy which included teaching the genderbread person infographic about gender
Yeah.
ideology, and this person expressed caution, and they were met with hostility, such hostility that the governing body voted to remove them from the board because of bigotry.
Wow. Bigotry for just wanting balance and caution in how early we sexualize underage children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how often gender ideology is presented as fact and something to be explored.
Yeah, and we know we've interviewed, for example, Professor David Payton, who's an industrial economist at Nottingham University, and his research indicates without any shadow of doubt, the more you teach kids about sex, the more sex they'll have. The earlier you teach kids about sex, the earlier they'll start having sex. So there's a linear progression to all of this. So balance and concern are warranted.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that Christian teachers hold really close to their heart.
Yep.
And I would say that many teachers are also very aware that the content they're being asked to promote not only conflicts with their own sincerely held religious beliefs, but often with the views of many families. And they feel that schools or outside providers, and obviously I don't want to demonize schools, because many schools are doing the very best they can with the information they have, or their interpretation of the information they have. But it seems that there's a small proportion of ideological groups that see it as their moral duty to replace family values, and we might say Christian values, family integrity and stability. Whereas there's actually, a lot of evidence to suggest that actually there are some really helpful ideas and some really beneficial ideas that come from a Christian worldview on sex and relationships. And if we express those in a moderate, restrained manner within a balanced framework, why on earth are we seeking to withhold those options?
That's exactly the thing, and really all we're looking for is sensible balance. And if anybody wants Christian relationship RSC material, Lovewise do a lot of that. Just go and Google Lovewise, you can find some excellent stuff there. But I understand a lot of schools won't want anything with a Christian emphasis, but we're just looking for balance, aren't we? And the idea is that we seem to have no problem when we talk about things like diet and healthy eating and that sort of stuff, that actually some ways of doing things are more healthy than others. But when it comes down to personal sexual relationships, oh, no. Anything goes, regardless of actually how unhealthy and dangerous it might be. Anything goes. And that seems bizarre, because we know that best outcomes come for children and for parents and for adults and for society when a child grows up with a married mum and dad, biological mum and dad. We know that in some situations, sadly, that's not possible. But as a general rule, that's where all the research says the benefits come from. So there's nothing wrong with saying to kids, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Statistically, empirically, sociologically, this is a good thing.
Absolutely. And Tony, the UK has one of the highest rates of family breakdown in the Western world, which is incredibly sad. And there's evidence that marriage has many benefits, and that actually Christian beliefs about relationships and about sex are rational. So there's no reason for students to be denied knowledge of these facts. And yet time and time again, respondents were saying that there is either a very kind of shallow exploration of that, or really no mention whatsoever of marriage as being, that, and that does actually contravene the guidance from the government.
It does. It's not balanced, is it really? It's not balanced at all. And nobody's saying, so I happen to be a Christian, but Coalition for Marriage, we have supporters from all faiths and none.
Of course.
A lot of them are Christians, quite frankly. But we're not asking for the biblical view on marriage to be put forward, but the secular view on the benefits of marriage to be put forward in a balanced way. Because the sociological secular evidence says it's really good for adults, it's really good for kids, and it's really good for society.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
All. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you going to do with this report? What's happening next? Where's it going to go?
So we are going to share this with as many people, as many sectors as we can, and we've already started to do that. I've shared it with those that may have reached into the higher echelons of sort of policy making, etc. I suppose, I hope that will have some impact, some consideration, and I've also fed this back as some evidence to the review body, the review panel, who are looking at RSE and going to be suggesting some changes, particularly to age appropriateness.
Yeah, the Department of Education review of RSE guidance, really, isn't it? Brilliant, because that's excellent. That's exactly what we need. Well, let me just remind everyone, if they don't know about the Association of Christian Teachers, you don't have to be a teacher. You can just, anyone who works in any capacity, paid or otherwise, with a school, they can join your organisation, and they can just have some great networking, some great support, and some great backup from you guys. Are you at all involved with the Free Speech Union by any chance?
Not directly, but obviously I do observe. I think it's Toby Young, isn't it? I observe what he says and does, and obviously, we are big advocates for the concept of free speech.
And how do we? Because I just think we've had the Chrissy Higgs incident recently. She was a supply teacher who was basically dismissed because she voiced her opinion that marriage should be between a man and a woman. We've had a governor recently who was again dismissed. Both of those people were vindicated through the courts, and the idea that marriages between a man and a woman is, the law says it's worthy of respect in a democracy, and it is worthy. Not only that, but it actually talks about what's best for society. So let's have some balance, and let's teach kids about what's good and right and best in terms of lifestyle. That's all we're asking. And fine, the other stuff, which is age appropriate, when it's age appropriate, and that should be determined by parents too. I live in Wales, of course, where in fact the right of withdrawal for parents has been removed by the government. So the government is saying, well, we will teach your kids from age 3 whatever we want to teach them, and you as parents are no longer primary educators and have no say in that. That's going down a very, very dark road, and really that's something we don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's something that I fear. I fear for Wales and places like Scotland as well.
That's right. Well, they're competing to be, all the home countries are competing to be the most woke in the world and outdo each other. But listen, Lizzie, I'm grateful for the work you guys are doing. I think ACT, the Association of Christian Teachers, such an important organisation. You've got a pivotal role to play, and it's a place where people can go to find help and to get some kind of networking and advice as they need to. I would encourage them to do that again. Thank you very much for the report. Thank you for coming and sharing it with us. And, I wish you go from strength to strength with it and all the work that you're doing. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Tony.